I'm Indra,
And I'm Amanda.
and we'd like to welcome you to The Messy Middle Matters. Hey, Amanda, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Indra?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited for today's topic because it's something that usually only gets discussed, if it gets discussed at all. It only gets discussed in hushed voices, behind closed doors. It's really, what do you do when somebody's outgrown the team or the organization and they have nowhere left to go? You love them, but you don't have anywhere. You have nowhere that you nowhere further you can take them.
Right. You have nothing left to give them at this
Yeah,
moment in time.
yeah. I mean, I feel like I've been on both sides of that in different parts of my career. I don't know. Any thoughts that you have around this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I've left jobs
Mm-hmm.
voluntarily for reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you know, uh, the reasons why I've left jobs, at least part of the reason was the company could not give me what I wanted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether that was like radically changing the culture of the organization
Sure.
or a
Just for you.
promotion, right? A promotion or more money or insert all of the reasons here, right? There are so many reasons people would
Yeah.
want to look elsewhere.
Yeah. And hopefully, by the end of this episode, the people who are listening, whether you're a people leader or you're a person who's working with an organization that you feel like you've outgrown, you might have a different perspective on how this can be both a strategic advantage for you as the employer, letting people move on, or, for yourself, a strategic advantage for going on to a new opportunity somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think, I mentioned, the changing organizational culture and all of that, right? Like the vibes of the organization. Usually that means bad vibes all around. There are ways to mitigate that, but that's not
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. I think we're being more intentional in talking about we can't give this person a promotion or the raise that they want, or the learning opportunities, or the leadership opportunities, or, just the more positive things that they're looking for that the organization, for whatever reason, can't provide.
Yeah. I mean, where I've seen or the a pattern where this is more prevalent is where there's like a really healthy culture. There's a lovely organization. And let's say there's a cohort of three people that joined around the same time at the same level. And they start moving up. And, we talk about leadership things usually often in the shape of pyramids. And there's a reason we talk about those pyramids because um, there are budgetary reasons for pyramids, right? Where you're thinking about like you can only hire and bring so many people to these different levels, or it's maybe the budget might be even just like capacity of people to support, or there might be stock options, or there's lots of different factors to it, but there's some of that. There's also, let's talk about there's only so many people to be led in an organization. Right.
Right.
So let's say you had people who were, we'll just I'll pick any one level, but like moving up to the people manager level. Let's say you had three people who started at the organization same time, all really talented, all relatively equally qualified. It's all relative, right? But you really, but the people that are more junior than them, there's only like two.
Mhm.
How can you promote three people into a manager role when there's no one to manage? There are
Right.
some very real practicalities to this, and it's not for lack of wanting to provide opportunities. It's there are just there are limitations, there are actual literal limitations, even if you do have the budgets, even if you do have a lot of different things.
Yeah. And, I've seen this happen where, you know, someone asked for what they wanted,
Yeah,
and the organization said, for whatever reasons,
yeah,
you're right,
usually budget.
usually budgetary, said, hey, can't do that for you.
Yeah,
And so that person goes off and interviews, looks elsewhere, like finds other opportunities, and they'll receive an offer from another
Hmm.
company who can give them what they want, whether that's
Yeah.
title, whether that's more money, whether that's more learning opportunities, whatever it is. And I've sometimes seen the company be like, "Oh, well, we can't
Yeah.
let you go. We can't lose you. So let's work something out."
It's, I'm just like giggling on the inside, like not in a conspiratorial way, not in a like that's funny or like that's silly. Because that is such a very real scenario. There's one company that I work for where the only way that people could get elevated was to get an offer from somewhere else for that higher title. Like
Mhm.
it was wacky. Like what a way to run your organization. But it also gets into things like and this is a much bigger topic. We won't go too deeply into it, but I mentioned it in at least the one episode that we've had in the past. I had the pleasure of seeing a compensation specialist, Aaron Tweet. He was teaching us about compensation philosophies and compensation models and when to have them. And like this particular scenario that you actually literally talked about came up. Somebody asked a question like, hey, I've got a compensation philosophy for everyone who is listening. And it was a new term to me, so I'll do my best to define it. Compensation philosophy is like, what do you do in all these various scenarios? Like how willing are you to stretch the boundaries between, and when are you willing to stretch the boundaries between the rules that you have in let's say pay bands or whatever it might be. So you figure all that's in an ideal world, actually, let's call it ideal, but I think that it should be the norm. But in an ideal world, you have that all defined ahead of time, so you know how you're going to respond when
Right, like
somebody
this is
comes
your
after you.
playbook. These are the rules that you've defined.
These are the rules you
And
define.
right, and as the situation comes up, you can go to your playbook and be like, "Oh, okay, this is what the scenario is. What should we do?" It's like the flow chart mentality, right?
The
Like
flow
if
chart
this, then
mentality. If this, then that. Because like if you do this for one person and there's these three people, let's stick with the three that we had. One person did this thing and got themselves elevated. The other two can do the same darn thing. What do you do then?
right.
Right? You start you at some point in time you are going to hit a boundary. And it's better to think through all these scenarios when the pressure isn't on, when the scenario isn't in your face and you get emotional, because we're human beings. Guess what? We have emotions. No matter how much we try and pretend that we're stoic, we actually have them, whether we acknowledge it or not, and they do cloud our judgment. Like having that be clear, because sometimes the best thing that you can do for the greater good of your organization, not for you feeling great, not for anything, is to let that person leave the organization. Let them leave in good, with a good relationship. And a term that I heard, learned years ago is you don't want somebody to be an ex-employee or a former employee. You want them to be an alumni or a graduate of your organization, right? You want that. And when using that terminology, it's all about looking back at another company as their alma mater and something that they're proud of. And so when they encounter other people, they're like, oh, that's great. And, even the people who are quote left behind feel really happy for that person. They got a great opportunity. Isn't that awesome? They landed a job at Google. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Right. They built up all these skills and had all these opportunities at this company and just took it as far as they could go. And they got this amazing opportunity where they could use everything that they learned. And it was just time to move on. No hard feelings. Like they're not leaving because things are bad. They're just leaving because, they're just ready for that next step somewhere else. And they remember that time fondly. And they talk about their time at Google or whatever company it is, right?
Right. Right, exactly. I mean, and that's because if you don't do that, like let's take budget out of the equation, like you get so darn top heavy. And how many, like we talked about, like people management, not everyone who moves up a food chain or up the ladder manages people. But when you have all these thought leaders at the top, there's no one left to do the work.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think letting your best talent leave is okay. And it should be encouraged. And like I think it's a risk mitigation strategy.
It is a risk mitigation strategy for the long-term success of your team. So much of leadership is not just looking at this particular moment in at the altitude you're usually at, looking at it from the 10,000 foot view, and then looking at it 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, and understanding the consequences of it. Because when you make these decisions that are out of line with the norm, the ripple effects that you hold on to them for a really, really long time.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this during our prep call,
Yeah,
but it's very similar to, setting your trade triggers for your stock portfolio, right? Like you want to have that figured out ahead of time so that you're not impacted by the heat of the moment, the emotional, like just the emotions of what's going on currently in the market to make decisions.
100%. And so my friend Enrique, big supporter. He'll be so happy that we're talking about trade triggers. Let me explain what a trade trigger is to everyone. So when you are working in the stock market and you're using a platform to invest and buy any type of equity, equity can be a stock, it can be lots of different things, but you're trying to invest in something, right? One of the best practices is to set trade triggers. So let's say, I'm trying to buy Apple. I'm going to choose numbers that are not real, but like I want to buy Apple. Apple today is at $100. I'm buying it at $100. And I want to make sure that I've decided that, when Apple reaches like $125, that's when I want to sell, right? Maybe Apple's not the best example because it's pretty reliable, but y'all, like when it reaches a certain threshold, I sell it, right? And then move on. Or if it drops to, let's say, $75, I sell it. And I set these automations in place. And then when these things hit these thresholds, that trade executes, right? And I don't want to go to the whole thing, but that's what we're talking about, like trade triggers. The trade is triggered by a certain set of conditions. And the recommendation is to figure out your trade triggers when the market hours are not there so that you're not faced with all those emotions of like watching like things bounce up and down. Oh my gosh, Apple went up a dollar, down a dollar, up a dollar, down a dollar. Like just look at it
Right,
when it's
it's at 125, but maybe it'll get to 126, 127. Should I just hang on to it? And if you get caught up in those
yeah,
emotional decisions, it's like you said, in relation to letting
yeah.
your best talent go, it's you're going to hold on to those decisions. You're going to be thinking about that decision that you made emotionally for a while.
For a while. And, but also, extending the trade trigger piece, like you can set secondary triggers where you reevaluate the situation in any sort of direction. So, like if Apple, it sells automatically at 125, I can always have something set up if it ratchets up to 126. Let's buy it again and let's see what happens. Like you can, I mean, I'm not recommending anyone takes this strategy. These are hypothetical scenarios. I'm an investment advisor because I do not know how to do this myself. So all hypotheticals, not financial advice. But when we're talking about people, like maybe, you have this plan where you set these decisions and you set this framework and you set whatever you want to do and market conditions change. A great example of market conditions changing was the year 2021. The hiring recruiting landscape was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Salaries skyrocketed. Everything was out of whack. And everyone needed to make certain decisions, right? And you need to figure out like, how am I handling things? I can revisit, like, this is my philosophy, but if I ever want to hire anyone, I need to make some exceptions at this moment in time. But then also, what people need to think about was like, when do I stop making exceptions? That's your other quote trade trigger. Like when you're making the exceptions, like when do I try and change my philosophy? So
Right. Right.
back,
Figure out what your exceptions are, right?
figure
Ahead of
out what your
time.
exceptions are. And so, like, bringing it back down to like a, more simplistic level, like take a look. I would like on during those quiet times, what is your org design? How many people do you have at different levels? What are the exceptions you're willing to make? What are the conditions that you want to make those exceptions? Like if I had somebody who was the chief technical architect or our creative director or visionary or strategist or whatever, like what are the types of talent that you're willing to make the exceptions, or sometimes like the literal person, because you're at a startup and they were the third hire and they happen to know an awful lot, or they were the third hire and they are vital to your culture, and you're pretty confident that like you could have an exodus if that person leaves. Like, figure things out both like generically and specifically. And then when people do let go, like, do choose to leave, don't feel like it's an insult to yourself. I think that that's part of it too.
Right. There's
People,
there's that emotional piece, right?
they take it personally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
And
not.
I think it's just a really good call out that it's yes, it is personal, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also business. And right, it's both. And sometimes the best business decision is to just let that person leave.
Let them leave. I mean, this could dovetail into like when you need to exit someone, but let's talk about the positives today. But you just need to let them leave. It's for the greater, it's for their betterment. Like, if you held on to that person, but you couldn't give them the opportunities, like, or you would get them into a situation where everyone's resenting them because they got, like, that's not great.
Right. It's not great. And I've witnessed those scenarios where, they that person who was irreplaceable, right,
Yeah.
got an offer and the company counter offered and they stayed. And the stories people tell themselves about what happened there. And it just sets a bad precedent.
It sets a bad precedent. There's one time in my career where I accepted a counter. Didn't work out well.
Yeah, it
Didn't
sets a
work out
bad
well.
precedent for everybody. And it's just like, no, I think it would have been better for everyone. The person who's trying to leave, the company, it's just better for everyone if we just let that person leave. Let them grow.
Let them grow. And when they grow, they create space for someone new to enter in your organization. And that brings new life and new perspective. Like, I love we work with constantly hiring people. And while I was there, we were blitz scaling. That's a whole nother conversation. But with each new hire, every single week somebody would point out the same things that we should be doing. But like, you get those fresh eyes. You get those fresh eyes, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we should do that. Yeah, and it's in you, or we can take a different perspective, or they'll bring in something from a different industry. It doesn't stagnate your organization. Like, if you really hold on to everyone too tightly, it's like that metaphor. Like, if you let, oh gosh, I knocked my microphone. If you love something, let it go. Or how do you keep a bird? Don't hold it too tightly, right? Like, there's different things to it. So
Yeah, for sure. And you maintain that positive relationship, I
mhm.
think is the one of the biggest benefits.
They don't resent you.
Right. They don't resent you. The employees who are left in the organization don't resent you or that person. Like if someone truly wants to leave because you cannot give them what they are asking for, okay.
Yeah.
Let them be a proud not alumni, alumnus.
Alumnus. Yeah. And I think that it's also don't forget to also have the right conversations with people who are, quote, left behind, right?
Yeah.
Because like,
I
you
know I
don't,
said left behind, but I didn't mean it like, oh, left behind.
there's no, I didn't think you did. And I can't find a better phrase for it, right? Like, the people
Right.
who
Who
continue to,
remain at
who
the
remain,
organization.
right? So
Yeah.
like, because they could feel left behind by that person, right?
hmm
They could feel like you didn't fight hard enough for them. They could feel a lot of different things. If you need to have those conversations with those folks and really, um, yeah, have the conversation with folks. It could be in like risk mitigation in having them follow that person. It could be, like, you've got a lot of different things. You can't, it's not just a one person thing, it's your entire team that you need to address when these things happen. And be clear and as transparent as you can on your philosophies around talent and compensation and all of that stuff. And just remind them and reinforce those things and say, hey, we're really happy when people find new opportunities. Are we happy that they left? No. But are we happy that they found something that really makes them happy? Yes, of course we are. Why wouldn't we be fans of that?
Yeah, I think you said something really important there. The reminders of the compensation philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just oh, I wrote it down in a doc and I shared it in the all company Slack channel and here you go. I think it's a constant reminder of this is our compensation philosophy, especially relevant around review cycle time and raise and promotion time, right? And just reminding everyone that this exists and these are the the rules, right? The limitations, the boundaries. This is like how we think about compensation here and like setting those expectations up front.
Or reminding people what they are in the economic downturns. Like,
Hmm.
let's be real about that stuff. Or reminding people when, again, 2021, wacky here in the job market. Remind, like, having those reinforcing conversations, having the like, or having the we hear you conversations, or having like there's so many and not just having the conversation, actually engaging in active listening in those conversations, and taking in those takeaways from those team members, and continuing to close those loops and follow-ups in whichever way you need to. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've said risk mitigation a few times.
Yeah,
Something that I just thought of was, you know, this is going to happen.
it is.
Your
Facts.
best talent is going to want to leave
Facts.
at some point. It's going to happen.
Facts.
Somebody you thought like was irreplaceable. You cannot function as a company without them. They are
Mhm.
going to leave. They're going to want to leave. So also think about how you're going to fill that gap. I can't think of a better term, but
Resiliency. I think
yeah,
it's resiliency. How do you build the resiliency into your organization?
right.
Yes.
Right. How do you build that resiliency? How do you build the structure and the systems to to lessen the load, to mitigate that risk, to, once that person leaves, all of their institutional knowledge doesn't immediately disappear.
And that's actually something that, I mean, it's not easy to always do that, especially when an organization is moving rapidly or is experiencing a lot of pressures. But having that kind of cross pollination, having the succession planning conversations around things, even at like you won't necessarily have to document it with your HR or your people professionals, but you should always have that in the back of your mind, like, oh, what happens, like, because the reality is that life is lifey, and you never know what could cause an exit, right? You
Yeah.
never know. And in this case, we're talking about like somebody got a great opportunity. Always have that. And it creates such rich conversations, which I kind of love. So, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other thoughts?
No, I think we covered a
Yeah.
lot of ground
We
here.
covered a lot of ground. I mean, and the
Yeah.
thing is, it's think of it as a graduation.
I
Think
know. I
of
when you said that, I love it. I
it's
I love
better.
I love thinking about it as a graduation of this school
Mhm.
that you're really proud to have attended and you learned so much and you
Yeah.
got to meet so many amazing people.
Yeah. And then you'll be in touch with them. You'll see them at the class reunion, the happy hour, or whatever, like,
Yeah.
and have embrace talent mobility, whether it's they're leaving an organization to, outside of the company, or going to a sister team or whatever it may. See that as a strength. You get to grow and develop the most exceptional talent that then others are so grateful to have on their team. Now, isn't that delightful?
Yeah. And we talked about it in our manager episode, right?
Yeah.
But like that's something that you should consider when you're considering taking the leap to becoming a people manager, right? Like
Yeah.
is that the thing that brings you joy? Being
That
able
thing.
to grow and mentor and, you know, let your little birds fly.
Let them fly. Get your nest empty. Get your nest
Yeah.
empty, and then refill it with new birdlings.
Yeah.
Anyway, Amanda, thank you again for joining me for our conversation that was so rich. Hopefully, our listeners got something good out of it. And I hope that, and thank you to our listeners for listening. We hope that you join us next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye.
Bye.